Hello there and welcome to another video. This is Gina from McGuire. Today I'm trying a new type of video that I call Card and Tip Showcase. I'll be focusing on a new release from Pinkfresh Studio, and I'll share lots of card examples along with a bunch of random tips. In the past, I've done product release close-ups where I just show you some new products. Well, today instead, I'm just going to create a bunch of random cards that go with those new products, and I'll share tips along the way. I hope you'll let me know in the comments below what you think of this type of video and if I should do this in the future. So this Pinkfresh Studio release that came out today is so fantastic I really couldn't decide which to use, so I decided to use almost all of them. Let's start with this card that you see here. Now for this one, I'm using the new Pinkfresh Studio Hello with a Bouquet die. This is a large die that fits nicely on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card. Now normally I do die cutting with a metal shim underneath my cutting plates to help cut through all the layers. But this time I'm removing that shim so that when I cut through my heavyweight white cardstock, it doesn't cut completely through. It basically cuts in some areas, not in others, but it still stays connected. I want it to stay connected for this particular technique. On the back, I'm putting some tape just to keep the pieces in place. You may not have to do this. It just depends on how your die cut machine cuts. Now what I'm doing here is adding color to all of the little pieces in this die cut. These little pieces are the ones that would normally pop out if I let it cut all the way through. But instead, I'm keeping them in place so I can add color to them. Notice that I'm not staying within the lines. That's okay. I've got a trick for you that will cover all of that up. I'm using a unique color combination today, and I'm going to use it on all of my cards. That saves me time, so I don't have to come up with different color combinations for each. And I list all of the Copic marker colors I use up there on the top of the screen. So once I've colored in all of the little pieces of this die cut, I'm going to run my die cut machine with the die and another piece of white cardstock, but this time I used the shim underneath the cutting plate so you can see how well this die cuts, and I just end up with an outline piece. I'm going to put glue on the back of this and put it on top of our colored piece. That way it covers up all of the areas where we colored outside of the lines. So I'm putting little dots of liquid adhesive over the back of this die cut piece, and I'll lay it on top of our colored piece, and look at that. Instantly it looks like we colored those in perfectly. It kind of looks like we did die cut inlay too, but saved a lot of time since we didn't actually have to inlay each of those little pieces. I wanted the word hello to be gold mirror and raised up a bit. So I die cut again with that die from gold mirror cardstock, and I saved the outline piece with all the floral parts for another card. Only use the hello die cuts on this one. I also die cut a bunch more from white cardstock so I could stack 3 hello die cuts on top of each other with liquid adhesive, and then on top of the white I put the gold piece. That way the gold stands out even more and has some dimension behind it. Gold mirror cardstock is really a great product to have because it's something that really catches the eye on your card and almost looks like a store-bought embellishment. So I added that all to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card, along with a few little pearls. So you can see how all of those colored pieces look like they're inlaid into the outline white die cut, and how the hello die cuts stand up and have that gold shine on top. So if you want to try the die cut inlay technique but want to save time, you might want to try this technique. There are also many other great techniques you can do with that large Pinkfresh Studio die. Okay, my next example shares how you can add color to a background die cut, even if it's very intricate. I'm using the new Pinkfresh Folklore Die. This is a beautiful background die. It cuts with great detail, and the overall size is 4 1/4 by 5.5, so it ends up covering the entire front of an A2 card. This time I decided to use my Gemini Junior die cut machine. I switched between this and my Big Shot Express. It's really just what I grabbed first, but this die cut machine is fantastic at cutting through intricate dies such as the one we're using here. So what I decided to do in this case is start with white cardstock and use my Copic markers to add coloring to it. And I'm just following along with the pattern of the die. You could use any coloring method you want here. It doesn't have to be Copic markers. I just did that because I had all the colors out already for my last card. So you can do blending, you could do watercolor, anything you want. Once you're done, you can remove all of the little bits that are in between, and you can adhere it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. Next, I wanted to add this Just a Note die cut to the center of the card, but notice that the die cut is in multiple pieces. I wanted to make sure that I arranged the pieces just right and in the center of the card. So here's a tip for that. I used the die to cut from vellum, and I'm using the negative piece of that vellum to center on my card. I can see through it and make sure it's centered and arranged just right. And then I can use some temporary tape to hold it in place. Over on the right, I use that Just a Note die to cut from black cardstock. I die cut 3 times and glued all the layers together for dimension. Now I'm taking those pieces, putting liquid adhesive on the back of them, and popping them right in place on that vellum negative piece that I have there. So I'm just popping them in like a puzzle piece. You want to press down and make sure that that adhesive is pressing onto that background so it stays put. So I'm putting all of the pieces in place. Once they're all in place and dried, I can tear away or remove carefully the vellum negative space. And then I can be sure that all of my little die cut pieces for this sentiment are in the right spot. By the way, this Just a Note die, it's from a coordinating die set for a Mandala stamp set that I'm going to show you later in this video. So here, after it's dry, you can see I'm just tearing away the vellum, carefully removing it so that I don't also remove the black die cuts. It's best to wait until it's completely dry to do this. Next, I'm adding some Tonic Aqua Shimmer pen to the top of my die cut so it has a little shimmer. Then I add Ranger Glossy accents on top of that for some shine and dimension. This helps to make that raised die cut sentiment stand out even more against that background. So I kept this card simple here. All I did was the background die cut and the layered die cut sentiment in the center. But there are many ways you could use that background die. It would be beautiful to use that background die to make an impression with an embossing mat. Or you could just do tone on tone to add some interest to the background of any card. If you've watched my videos, you know I love background dies, and this one is beautiful. Okay, next I'm going to create a different type of card using a new stamp set from Pinkfresh Studio and the coordinating dies. To start with this one, I have 2 note cards that are 4 1/4 by 5.5, and I'm going to score each of them at 3 1/4. So you can see up here on my scoreboard, I'm at 3 1/4 from the edge. I do a score line on one, and then a score line on another. You could change where that score line is depending on how much of a gap you want in the middle, which you'll see in a moment. So on each of these, I'm folding at that score line and reinforcing it with my bone folder. And I have these fun kind of Z fold cards that I can put together, and you'll see that I can have a fun kind of gatefold card with a gap in the middle. I'm using the new Pinkfresh Lush Greenery stamp set. This is one of those classic stamp sets that could be used for many occasions. I like that there are 2 border stamps included and lots of different sentiments that you can build. Now the coordinating die set cuts out those 2 border stamps, but also cuts out the word awesome and fabulous. I really like when coordinating dies offer that. It also has the word kind that it die cuts alone. So I'm going to stamp these border stamps along the folded edge that we created. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool simply because I don't want to mess up at this point, and I find that the stamping tool helps me to make less mistakes. So I'm stamping this close to the folded edge that we just created. Not right up against it, but close. And I'm stamping it with Copic friendly ink. I then will color that in with Copic markers, but you could use any coloring method you want. I'll do the same on the other piece. Okay, so after I've colored that completely, I will use the coordinating die to cut those two borders partially. We're going to do some partial die cutting for this. If you do not have the coordinating dies, you could cut them out by hand. I'll show you how to do partial die cutting. I have the die here. I'm lining it up with the stamping and coloring that I've done and taping it in place with some purple tape. I will now position this into my die cut machine with the cutting plate on top only covering a part of this. Anything under the cutting plate here to the left will cut. Anything hanging out will not cut. So I'm not cutting that bottom line of the die. That way I just get the edge cut and I have a score line on the other side. Again, you could cut that by hand if you wanted to. I will repeat this with the other card that we created, or the other half of the card. You could also do this fun fold technique using any border dies that you may have. Here you can see how the two pieces fit together and will have a gap in the center for the sentiment. But I first want to add a little gold decorative cardstock strip along both of the folded pieces. Again, I really like the gold shiny cardstock because it draws a lot of attention to your card and it's very inexpensive compared to embellishments. If you don't have gold shiny cardstock like this, you could instead just cover a strip of cardstock with gold embossing powder. Now we're going to glue our two halves together. You want to use something strong here so it doesn't come undone. And you just place one half into the other half. And you can see how the fold lines there with the leaves meet close in the center. I trimmed off the extra gold cardstock and stamped a sentiment in the center with black ink. You can see here how the card opens up. You have plenty of room to write a message there in the bottom or in the top if you wanted to. And I also stamped that leaf border on the flap of my matching envelope so everything coordinates nicely. Now that sentiment that says every day may not be good, but there's good in every day is from this new Pinkfresh Studio stamp set. This set is called My Favorite Things to Say, and I encourage you to take a closer look at all the sentiments as they are very unique and I really like many of them. I'll be using some on a card later in this video too. Okay, on to the next card. This time I'm going to show again how to create a see-through card front using layered background dies. I've done this in a video before and I'll link to it in the top right corner here if you want to check it out, but I have additional tips today. I'll be using two background dies, the Geo Star 2 and the Geo Star 1 from Pinkfresh. You can see how they can be used separately and they offer intricate detail, or you can layer them for a beautiful layered look. So I will start by gluing the more intricate die cut on top of the other die cut using strong liquid adhesive. You could use a spray adhesive and save time here. I'm just not a big fan of spray adhesives, but that's another option. Once I have these glued together, this will be the front of my card, which will be see-through, which offers a really unique design. And then the back of the card will be that solid white piece that you see at the top left there. These are all 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I'm taking my solid piece and I'm going to do a score line that I can hide under the pattern of the front of our card. So if you look there, there's a line on the front of our card at about 3/8 of an inch. So I'm scoring right there. You can score anywhere you want. Now this score line will give us a hinge that will be on the back of our card that allows our card to open up nicely. I'm not folding at that score line. I'm only putting a score line there so there's a hinge so that I can open up easily. So I'm laying that piece down. You can see that score line is up there at the top but not folded. Putting liquid adhesive at the top portion of the front of our card. This is the portion that will be above the score line. I will glue these two pieces together and then we will have a card base. So the front will be see-through and the back will have that little hinge towards the top to allow it to open and close. I'm using the Pinkfresh Happy Hugs stamp set. This is such a sweet set with the two bears that are kind of hugging there with the scarf and many little sentiments about hugs, which I'm a big fan of signing my cards, Hugs Jennifer, so this is great for me. Wanted to show you how I created the main element on the card. First, I'm doing the little background for the bears. Now, I wanted it to be like a purplish blue ink, and I didn't have the right color. So instead, I'm stamping purple ink, then I'm stamping on top a few times with blue ink until I get that perfect purple-blue color. So these are Passion Flower and Soft Blue from Hero Arts that I'm layering together. And check it out, I got that perfect color. So I stamped the bears and colored them and cut them out by hand, but you could definitely use the coordinating die if you prefer. I'm using foam tape to add it right into the background. And then I have the sentiment that says, "Your hugs are my favorite." I cut the sentiment between the words so I could stack parts of the sentiment. The top line says, "Your hugs are," and the bottom line says, "My favorite." And I stamped that with black ink right under the rest of our stamping. I can now trim this down with my trimmer, and this will go right in the center of that see-through card that we created. I matted my stamping with some black cardstock, and I cut another piece of black cardstock to the same size. This will be glued on the inside of the card. So you can see the glue is facing up towards the camera, and I'm lining it up on the front of our see-through card. Then I can add more glue to the back of our stamped panel and line it up. That way you won't see any adhesive when we add it to the front of our card. I added some Aqua Shimmer pen to that purple sky. This is a fun way to add some shimmer to your stamping. I stamped that background, but then I added the shimmer with the pen. I also added a glitter silver die cut heart to the heart that's in the sky, and also some black Nouveau drops to the eyes and nose of the bear. So you can see how the front of this card is see-through, and all you need to do is write your message on the inside of the card behind that panel that we glued to the front so that it doesn't show through. This is a fun way to get more out of your background dies. And I gotta say that sentiment is on my list of favorite all-time sentiments, so I'll be using it often. Okay, my next card is probably the one that I was most excited about because the stamp set in the background is just so much fun to use. This is the Pinkfresh Studio's Inked Florals stamp set. So you have those outline kind of sketchy flowers, and then there are more solid images that you can stamp on top of that to add some artsy looking color to it. I'm going to show you how to do that and add a little more interest to those using markers. That's one of my best tips that I can offer, is to add those little details to really make a card stand out. So I have a piece of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white cardstock in my MISTI stamping tool. I'm starting to arrange some of the sketchy flower images towards the center of the card, as close together as I can, because I plan to cover this entire piece with stamping. So then I will use my anti-static powder tool on my cardstock, ink up the images with Versamark ink, and then add silver embossing powder and heat set it. I'll do all of my outline stamping with silver embossing, and then I will stamp with soft colors for the solid pieces that go on top of these outline images. So now I'll put this back into my MISTI, and I'm taking those solid images and stamping those next. Now this is supposed to kind of give an artsy look where they don't line up perfectly and it kind of gives a sketchy look, and I love that because that's a look I like to do, but I have trouble achieving on my own. I'm not great at watercolor or coloring, but I can really do great with a stamp set, and that's what this has to offer. So I'm stamping with some soft vanilla ink from Hero Arts. I'm actually double and triple stamping these light colors to make them a little more vibrant. This is Altenew Frosty Pink, and I added that for some of the flowers. And then the third color I'm using is the Arctic color from Altenew. That's also a very, very soft color, a soft bluish purple color. Again, I'm sticking with the same color palette for all of these cards, just to save me time since I don't have to think of new color palettes for each. Next, I'm just adding more flowers around that. I find it best to kind of start at the bottom and work my way up, or start in the middle and work my way out, so that I don't have any dead white spaces. Another great tip for stamping is to go back and add a little bit of extra color, a little bit darker, with your markers. I decided to go in with my Copic markers in a color that's slightly darker than the inks that I used, and just add some color towards the center of each of the flowers. This makes a huge difference. It makes your images pop out a bit, gives the look of shading or dimension. Just be careful when you're using Copic markers with heat embossing. I try not to touch the heat embossing, as I'm afraid that it might damage the tip of my markers. I was careful not to touch the heat embossing in this case, but if you want to be safe, you could use other markers or colored pencils for this. I did not take time to make sure that this added color was perfect. I wanted to stick with that artsy look. Now, my next tip on this card is that you can use your Quickie glue pen or liquid glue pen to add dots of heat embossing. I wanted to fill in some of the white spaces in the background with dots of silver, so I put little dots with my liquid glue pen, added the silver embossing powder, and heat set it. And I'm able to heat emboss with the Quickie glue pen. I added a white heat emboss sentiment that says today is a good day for a good day, and that's from that My Favorite Things to Say stamp set that I showed you earlier. I trimmed everything down and added it to a gray note card. You can see the silver heat embossed dots in the background, and also that look of shading that we added with a little quick coloring with Copic markers. Both of these are things that you can do to cards to really make them stand out more. Okay, next I have a set of 4 cards that I created using 2 new die sets from Pinkfresh Studio. The first is the Dainty Blossom die set. All of these dies are included together in the set, and they cut out some fun sketchy flowers with very thin lines. I love intricate dies because I could never cut them out by hand, so they're fun to add to cards. I wanted to share another way to add quick coloring, very soft coloring, to your die cuts. So I die cut a bunch of flowers from white cardstock. And I'm using various die inks along with the Picket Fence Life-Changing Brush Set. These brushes are very dense and are great for adding color, especially soft color, to backgrounds, but they also work for adding soft color to die cuts. So I first added some green using one of the brushes, then I added some soft kind of peach color, and then I came in with the tiniest of the brushes and added some darker color. I like that the brush set includes different sizes, so you can kind of change up how much ink you apply to each piece. If you don't have brushes like these, you could instead use an ink blending tool or other sponges. I just like that these add color very evenly without like harsh lines, and you can do soft coloring. So after I colored all those flowers, it's time to use the Pinkfresh Noteworthy frame dies. Now this die set is brilliant. I don't know why none of us have come up with this idea in the past, but this is brilliant. So basically it cuts that top line and the bottom line, but not the lines on the side. So you can die cut these labels, but they're actually part of your background. So you can tuck things behind the die cut. So let me show you. I die cut those from the bottom center of some white cardstock pieces. And you can see how it die cuts partially, just not on the sides. So what I'll do is take all those flowers that I created with the inking technique and just tuck them behind these die cut portions. Then I can add a sentiment right at the center of the die cutting on the background. A brilliant little set of dies. They're inexpensive and great for very simple cards like the ones I'm making here. So I just used my Versamark ink to stamp the sentiments in the center of the die cut area, and I added gold embossing powder and heat set it. I tucked my flowers into the die cut slits and taped them on the back so they wouldn't move. I then used foam tape on some of the flowers and regular liquid adhesive on others, so that some stood out a bit more than the others. So these noteworthy frame dies could be used in many different card designs. You can tuck different flowers or images behind it, so it adds a look of dimension without too much dimension added. So I thought it'd be fun to make a set of 4 cards using different flowers and the different frames. I trimmed my white panels down and added them to a soft gray note card. And here you can see the 4 different cards that I came up with. For the first card, I used a sentiment from the older Pinkfresh Studio stamp set called Bird with a Flower stamp set. I've used this stamp set in a video in the past, and I'll link to it up here on the top right corner if you'd like to check it out. Since these cards are super simple, I did add some shimmer pen to my die cut flowers that I inked, just so they had a little bit of shimmer to it and drew attention to the card more. So for this one, the sentiment is from this Pinkfresh Studio Forest Friends stamp set. I've used this set before, again linked in the top right corner. I like that just a note sentiment. It's small and can be used for many different occasions on different cards. From this same sentiment, I used the Hello Friend sentiment on this next example. That's another one of my favorite sentiments that I've used on many cards. It just seems to fit nicely in small places, but has interest to it. And then I used it on the fourth card here. I really like this Noteworthy frame die cut or partial die cut there at the center. I think it adds a lot of interest, and I like that it's a circle in the center. So this last example I'm about to share is probably my favorite from this release. The reason is I love when a stamp set comes along and provides everything you need to create a very detailed looking card in no time at all. This is the Pinkfresh Studio Mandala stamp set. Now you can stamp the solid image and then the outline image, or you could stamp them separately. And then you have the additional little bird images that fit perfectly in it, along with the fun little sentiments included. And the coordinating die set cuts all that out and also has that just a note die that I used earlier in this video. So there's a lot of bang for your buck with this stamp set and coordinating die set. So I'm starting with this 6" by 6" piece of white cardstock, and I'm drawing a little plus sign right at the center using my T-ruler. This will help me position my stamping right at the center. So I'm starting with this solid large image and lining it up with that plus sign. And I'm going to ink this up and stamp it a few times with the Altenew Arctic ink. I could do one stamping for super light, but I plan to do 3 stamped images for a little bit darker color. I'm then lining up the solid bird image to fit right in the nook of our first stamping and stamping that with soft vanilla ink. And I notice this works out that I can just rotate my paper each time and stamp it repeatedly to fill in the other spots, since I'm stamping in the center of this white cardstock. Now here's a very, very important tip. Whenever you're doing stamp layering and you don't want your inks to kind of blend into each other, you want to heat set your first layer before stamping the second layer. That's very important. I want this next layer that I'm going to do to stay nice and crisp. So I'm lining the outline of that large image up with the solid image I've already stamped. And I'm stamping this twice with Hero Art's soft granite ink. This is a soft gray, so by stamping it a couple of times, it gets a little bit darker. Next, I'll stamp the outline of the bird images on top of the yellow, again with the soft granite ink. I can stamp it once, then rotate my paper and stamp it and rotate it until all the birds are stamped with the outline. Then I'll heat set that again just to make sure the inks don't bleed or blend into each other. I then am using matching Copic markers just to add a little darker touch here and there. As I mentioned before, this really brings a lot of solid stamped images to life because it adds that look of shadow or dimension. It's worth that extra little effort in the end, especially since the stamping didn't take long for this. Since I stamped this on a larger 6 by 6 piece, I could trim this down to whatever I want for any size card. I could trim it down to 4 by 5 1/4 and add it to a typical A2 card. But I decided to trim it down to 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 for a square card. I then am using a thank you sentiment from that same Mandala stamp set, and I heat embossed that at the center of the card and added it to a 4 1/2 by 4 1/2 yellow note card. I then have a matching square envelope, and I stamped one of the images on that so it matches perfectly. So you can see this card didn't take long at all. I added tiny little drops of glossy accent to the pattern in the background, but that's it. Doesn't take much. But because I took the time to heat set between the layering of inks, I ended up with crisp lines and nice results. Now there are a few more products that were part of this Pinkfresh Studio release that I didn't have a chance to use, but wanted to show you quickly. This is the Pinkfresh Fancy Bloom stamp set. There are lots of large images in here. This is a 6 by 8 stamp set that would be fun for coloring. There are also coordinating dies available. I think it would be fun to gold heat emboss these and add color to them. You could even do it on vellum. I also really like the Pinkfresh Studio Do All Things with Love die. Now this die set includes the words and the shadow die. So you can see what it looks like there, and this is what the sizing is. This is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card. So you can see this is a large sentiment that fits perfectly. So you could add any kind of stamping behind it, and this would be the focal point of your card. You could even trim it down to just say with love or the word love alone. I also really like how unique this Pinkfresh Studio Hey Gorgeous die set is. It cuts very intricate words that say hey gorgeous, but then it also has the dies to cut the shadow for it, which helps it to stand out on a card. Again, this is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card, so you can get an idea of the sizing. It fits nicely on a horizontal card design, but it also looks great at the bottom of a vertical card design. So you could use these words together or separately, and I really like the style of it. So there you have it, a closer look at the new Pinkfresh Studio release and lots of cards using these products. Let me know what you think of this new card and tip showcase video style, where I show a new release with lots of cards and tips. I'm curious what you think of it. All the products that I used are linked in my YouTube description below. In the middle here are a couple other videos that are related that you might want to check out. I thank you for spending some time with me today, and I hope to see you again soon. Have a great week.